The Ghost Battalion. Soldiers who vanished without a trace. Have you ever heard about soldiers who disappeared? Without a trace? Not captured? Not killed? Just gone. In the winter of 1943, buried deep in a forest few dared to enter, a battalion of 97 men marched into the mist. Only one ever returned. And what he said made even the most hardened generals fall silent. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He whispered, "They're still there, but they're not the same anymore." Let me take you back. It was a moonless night in northern Europe, bitter cold, the kind that cuts through uniforms and gnaws at your bones. A ghostly silence wrapped the forest like a shroud. No birds, no wind, just stillness, and that strange, thick fog crawling through the trees like it had a mind of its own. The 6th Reconnaissance Battalion, young, brave, and untested, had received a classified mission. Orders were direct: advance northeast, secure a forgotten bunker rumored to house abandoned Nazi intelligence. Simple, at least on paper, but things were already wrong before they crossed the river. The radios crackled, not with voices, but with a low whisper, like breath, breathing in, breathing out. No words, just presence. "Could be interference," said Lieutenant Harrow, brushing it off. But others weren't so sure. A private swore he heard someone say his name. Not once, 3 times, and not in English. Still, they pushed on. Around midnight, the fog thickened. It was like walking through milk. Shapes moved at the edges, figures maybe, but no one could see clearly. One by one, soldiers started whispering among themselves. "Did you hear that?" "No footsteps, but someone's walking behind us." "I saw a face, in the trees. It wasn't human." Lieutenant Harrow ordered silence, but silence was worse, because in silence, they heard it again. Drums, not loud, distant, faint, beating from somewhere deep within the forest, rhythmic, ritualistic, not mechanical, not modern. Old. "Keep moving," Harrow ordered, but not all of them could. That's when they found the first man. Lying face up, eyes open, frozen in shock. No wounds, no struggle, but his mouth. It was wide open, stretched unnaturally, like he died mid-scream, and etched into his forehead a symbol. They couldn't understand it. Circular, jagged, not German, not Latin, just wrong. Private Daniels refused to go any further. He shouted, fired a warning shot, and tried to run. But he never got far. His body was found the next day, 30 feet up in a tree, bent backward over a branch like a rag doll. That was the second death. By dawn, 7 soldiers were missing. The fog didn't lift. The whispers got louder. They didn't come from the radios anymore. They came from the trees. Some soldiers stopped sleeping. Others stopped speaking. One wrote a journal. Just a few pages. They were found later, soaked in something dark and sticky. One sentence was repeated over and over. "We shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be here." Then the journal ends. But the story doesn't. You see, after the second night, something changed. The ground, it pulsed, not metaphorically, literally, like a slow heartbeat pounding beneath their boots. When they looked down, some claimed they saw faces in the mud, grinning, staring back. One soldier tried to dig. He never came back, just his shovel, bent in half, covered in frost, and something else. Teeth, but not human, not animal, something in between. Lieutenant Harrow, now visibly shaken, ordered a full retreat, back the way they came. But the path behind them was gone. The trees had moved. They swore they'd marked them, tied fabric to trunks, scratched arrows into bark. All gone. Or worse, rearranged, as if someone was watching and playing. By the 4th night, only 20 were left. The fog grew thicker. Their flashlights flickered. Batteries drained faster than they should have. And the whispers? They stopped, replaced by singing, faint, melodic, children's voices. But there were no children in that forest, only bones, piles of them, arranged in circles, carefully, almost lovingly, skulls facing inward, jawbones broken open as if screaming into eternity. Then came the last night. Only 3 were left: Harrow, Sergeant Vance, and Corporal Ellis. They huddled inside a ruined chapel they found in the clearing. A building that wasn't on any map, a structure no scout had reported, a church with no door, just stained glass windows, all shattered except one. It showed a soldier kneeling before a dark figure. Not Jesus, not Mary, something else. Eyes black, wings broken, crown of teeth. Corporal Ellis went mad. He clawed at his face, screaming, "It's inside! It's inside!" before running into the woods. He was never seen again. That left 2, Harrow and Vance. But Vance didn't make it to morning. His body was found outside the chapel, eyes gouged out, fingers frozen mid-prayer. Only Harrow survived. Found 2 days later by a local patrol, walking barefoot, eyes wide, hands trembling. He said only one thing before collapsing. "They're not dead, they're waiting." He was discharged, institutionalized, records sealed. And the battalion, officially listed as MIA due to environmental disorientation. But unofficially, they were erased. No mention, no medals, no photos, just a whisper in the dark, among soldiers who heard too much. And now, you've heard it too. What do you think really happened out there? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And whatever you do, don't forget to like this video if the story chilled you, because this is just the beginning. Keep watching. The truth is deeper than you think. The forest didn't release them. It studied them. And the further they walked, the more it felt like they were being herded. After Lieutenant Harrow was rescued, he stopped speaking. But some of the early radio logs survived, hidden, classified, disregarded as technical interference. But if you listen closely, really listen, you'll hear what they heard. Static. Then faint murmurs. A child humming. A scream, cut off. Then a voice, raspy, guttural, repeating one word over and over. "Come." And that's when it began. The first strange sign was light. Not fire, not torch, but a glow, greenish, faint, floating. Private Malloy was the first to see it. Said it hovered just above the ground and moved like it was watching him. He followed it. For 2 minutes. That was enough. When they found him, he was kneeling, eyes wide. Alive, but not responsive. His boots were gone. His dog tags melted. In his mouth, stuffed deep, was a piece of parchment. No one could read the writing. It wasn't German. It wasn't Latin. It wasn't anything known. Only one symbol made sense. The circle again, with teeth. They marked that place, called it the Deadlight Grove. They should have left. But orders came in. Proceed, intelligence still expected. So they moved on. But the air changed. It wasn't cold anymore. It was heavy. You know that feeling right before a storm breaks? That thick pressure? That sense that something's coming? Now imagine that. But it never breaks. Private Chen started coughing blood. No wounds, just blood from the lungs. Medics couldn't explain it. His skin began to blister in patterns, spirals, dozens, crawling down his chest like a road map. And at night, things started visiting the tents, not animals, figures. One soldier described them as man-shaped holes in reality, not shadows, absences, where light refused to land. And wherever they passed, frost appeared, even in places that were warm before. Private Leclerc tried to touch one. He was found face down, rigid, skin gray, no heartbeat, but still warm. Still warm. And in his hand, clenched so tight they had to break his fingers, was a scrap of uniform. Not his, from a battalion disbanded in 1916, one that was never recovered. The whispers returned next, louder now, echoing, and they didn't just call names. They laughed, a wet, choking laugh, like lungs filled with water, and at 3:03 a.m., every soldier awoke, screaming. Everyone. Same dream. They were back in the chapel, surrounded by men with no eyes, chanting. Some tried to write down what they saw. The pages were blank by morning. But their hands were still moving, even in their sleep. Scratching, clawing, etching symbols into the frozen dirt. Circles, teeth, wings, eyes, always watching. Sergeant Vance confronted Harrow, demanded they leave. Go back, call for evacuation, but the radios stopped working. Everyone. And the forest? It moved again. Trees where there were none. Paths that didn't exist before. Compass needles spun like they were lost, too. The men began to splinter. Some talked to trees. Others claimed they saw family members calling them into the woods. One man sang to something in the mist, then walked into it, naked, smiling. They never saw him again. And that night, they found their maps, ripped to shreds, every single one, except one copy. But it was different, hand-drawn, on human skin, markings in blood. A route not to safety, but deeper in, marked, home. That's when it clicked. They weren't here to retrieve intel. They were the experiment, the bait, for something that wasn't done feeding. And somewhere deep, beyond even the old maps, was a place no one had named. The soldiers gave it one. The Hollow. A place where even echoes didn't return. Do you feel that tension building? Yeah, that's not just the story. It's the silence between what's real and what your brain refuses to accept. Because these men, these soldiers, they were not paranoid. They were paying attention. To something. Most of us are trained to ignore. The gut instinct. The sixth sense. That chill on your neck when nothing's there. Except something always is. One soldier wrote in the margin of a torn journal, "They never meant us to come back, but I will, even if I have to walk through death itself." Was it bravado or a warning? That depends. Do you believe ghosts can lie? Or worse? Do you believe some of them still wear uniforms? The next part of this story gets darker. And you'll want to keep your eyes open, because if you blink, you might miss who's standing behind you. He wasn't supposed to make it out. He was the youngest, quiet, unassuming, Corporal Jonah Riker, age 23, status MIA, then unexpectedly found wandering along the riverbank 5 days after the last known transmission from the 6th Reconnaissance Battalion, shoeless, eyes bloodshot, whispering to no one. The rescue team thought he was delirious, another victim of frostbite and shell shock, until they checked his pulse. It was normal, steady, but cold. Too cold. Like he hadn't walked out of the forest. Like the forest had released him. They brought him in, quarantined him. No family, no media, no questions. Just silence. Until one night. He spoke. Only once. They're still there, and they're watching the ones who remember. And then, silence again. But Jonah wrote, late at night, long after, the nurses fell asleep. He'd scribble frantically. Pages and pages, all filled with fragments, sentences torn apart, symbols, maps, names he'd never spoken aloud. Until one night, it all poured out. It started 2 nights before the final transmission. The squad was down to 10 men. Food was low, water tainted. Some drank it anyway. They didn't wake up. Jonah remembered Vance pacing, muttering, ripping pages out of his field journal, drawing circles over and over. And then, the music, software haunting. A piano somewhere deep in the trees. No one believed it at first. But they all heard it. It played the same tune again and again, a melody Jonah couldn't forget if he tried. Da-da-da-dum, da-da-da, da-da, like something your grandmother might hum, he said, but slower, distorted, like it had been buried in the ground and dragged out. The others followed it. Jonah didn't. Something told him not to. A whisper just behind his ear. Don't follow the tune. It's not for you. He froze, turned around. No one was there. When he looked back, the others were gone. No footsteps, no sound, just empty air. He waited hours, called out. No answer, but something watched him. He could feel it. Breathing. Not fast, not aggressive, just breathing. Jonah ran, through thorns, branches, broken stone, and fog. He ran blindly until he collapsed near a dry creek bed. When he woke, the sky was pulsing, not with sunlight, but with something dull and red, like embers behind cloud, and carved into the dirt beside him were handprints, too many to count, child-sized, deep, pressed into stone like clay, and above them, a name, his name. In perfect, clear handwriting, as if written with care. He didn't remember standing, didn't remember walking, but somehow he found himself standing at the edge of the river. And the chapel, the one they'd camped in days ago, was back. Only this time the windows weren't shattered. The glass was whole, and inside each pane, a face. Each one was smiling. Each one was crying, and all of them looked like soldiers. He tried to run, but the ground pulsed beneath him again, like a heartbeat. Slow, steady, and with each pulse, something rose. Figures, uniforms torn, eyes dark, smiling, and behind them, a woman. She didn't speak, she didn't move, but her presence was suffocating. Her face was pale, but her eyes, they were too many, more than two, all blinking, all staring, and in her hand she held a journal. His. Open to a page he hadn't written yet. It read, "You came back. Good. Now you'll remember for them." And then, darkness. Jonah awoke on the riverbank, alone, clothes torn, journal in hand. He didn't remember how he got there. But the journal? It had the same sentence, handwritten, different ink. Not his. "You came back. Good. Now you'll remember for them." Jonah was moved to a long-term military facility. But his story? It leaked. One nurse. She kept a copy of a page she wasn't supposed to see. It wasn't a confession. It was a list. 12 names, all from different battalions. All had gone missing in action. All had reportedly vanished without a trace in various parts of the world. But beside each name, one word, returned, except one. The last name, Jonah Riker. Beside his, blank. As if he wasn't supposed to. Some say he never truly left the forest, that the thing which came back with his face was just the beginning. And if this part of the story made your spine tingle, just wait, because what happens next will challenge what you believe about memory, war, and the things that linger long after the guns fall silent. Stay with me. This isn't over. The strange thing about fear is how quiet it becomes when it settles in. The soldiers stopped talking, not out of discipline, but dread. Each noise felt like a trap, each breath borrowed. And it was around then. The trees began to move. No, not sway in the wind. Move, like legs, like watchers. Vance had noticed it first. He marked a tree with his combat knife. 3 slashes, deep, obvious, but 20 minutes later they passed it again. Same marks, same moss, same crooked root near the base. He didn't believe it. So he did it again, and again, and again. Each time, the path brought them back. To the same tree, like the forest was folding in on itself, wrapping tighter around them, like it was alive, and hungry. By that time, only 6 remained. Jonah, Vance, Raphael, Cole, Morrison, and Thorne. Each one had stopped sleeping. When you close your eyes and hear someone whisper your name over and over, sleep becomes a luxury. Cole had the worst of it, said he kept seeing someone in the dark. A tall figure in a tattered uniform, its face shrouded but its eyes glowing faintly, like dying embers. He said it never moved, just watched, until he blinked. Then it would be closer, and closer, and closer, until... He refused to open his eyes after that. They found him slumped against a tree with his eyelids sewn shut, with barbed wire. No one heard him scream. That night, Vance snapped. He said the place was cursed, claimed it wasn't a forest, not anymore, that it had become a memory, alive and cruel. Jonah said nothing, but he agreed. Raphael carried the only remaining radio, and it sparked to life just before dawn. No words, just static. Then, a voice, distorted, warbled, a single sentence. You shouldn't have stayed. Then silence again. They tried to respond, but the microphone had melted in Raphael's hand. Morrison started digging that day. Didn't say why, just dropped to his knees and clawed at the earth like something was buried there. And it was. A helmet, not theirs. British, World War I era, still intact, covered in frost, though the air was warm. Inside it, a skull, jaw wide, teeth shattered, something scratched into the bone from inside. Let me out. They didn't talk much after that, because the singing returned. Same tune, slower, now layered. Men's voices, women's, children's, all in perfect harmony, like a choir performing just beyond the tree line. But the lyrics weren't human. Not language, not melody, just syllables that made their ears bleed if they listened too long. And they did. They always did. That night, Thorne wandered toward it. No one stopped him, not because they didn't care, but because their legs wouldn't move, their muscles locked, as if some invisible weight pressed down on their spines. Jonah remembered trying to scream, but no sound came out. Only after the last note ended did they break free. Thorne was gone. In his place was a trail of teeth, all molars, arranged in a perfect spiral pointing inward. The forest grew louder after that, not with sound, but presence. You ever walk into a room and just know you're not alone? Multiply that by 10, that's how it felt. Everywhere, behind trees, beneath roots, above the canopy, eyes, watching, waiting. Vance tried to pray, but every time he started, something would knock from behind a tree. 3 knocks, always 3, like it was answering back. On the 6th night, Morrison cracked, started laughing. Not out of amusement, but surrender. Then he said something no one forgot. What if we're already dead, and this is just them showing us how we died? No one answered, because it made too much sense. That night, Jonah dreamt of the chapel again. Only this time he was inside, alone. The stained glass glowed, all windows intact, but every pane showed the faces of his squad. Mouths open, eyes black, hands pressed against the inside like they were trapped behind the glass. And in the center was him. But not him. Smiling, and behind his image the dark woman stood again, still silent, still watching. When he woke, his chest burned. Something had been carved into his skin, a spiral, and within it, a tooth, fresh, bleeding. That morning, the 5th man vanished. Just him and Vance now. They didn't speak. They just walked, toward nowhere, and everywhere. Until the fog lifted, only slightly, just enough for Jonah to see the river. And Vance, gone. No struggle, no sound, only his dog tag on a branch, twisting in the wind, and carved into the tree below it, Jonah's name. Again, he ran. And you already know what happened next. But what you don't know is that the strange events didn't end there, not even close. What comes next isn't just strange, it's terrifying. Because now, the forest is following them back. The forest may have released Jonah Riker, but it never let go. After his rescue, strange things began happening around the base where he was kept. Clocks ticked backward, security footage glitched, only at night, and twice a week, on no fixed schedule. The chapel from Jonah's story? It appeared in satellite images, where nothing stood before, then vanished the next day. At first, the commanding officers dismissed it as malfunction, until one of them, Colonel Weiss, disappeared during a routine inspection of the area. They found his boots, still warm, laces untied, and a single page of handwritten script jammed into the toe. It read, "The forest doesn't remember time like we do. It keeps the pain. It feeds on it." Suddenly, Jonah's story wasn't just a story anymore. An old field researcher named Dr. Clemens was brought in, a specialist in folkloric anomalies buried within combat zones. She didn't laugh, didn't doubt. She listened. And then, she brought out a photo. Black and white. Cracked, faded. A group of soldiers. British. Smiling. Caption, 1916 Operation Hollow Rain. Jonah froze. He pointed at the man in the back row. "That's him," he whispered. "That's the one who kept getting closer." But that couldn't be. The soldier was long dead, except he hadn't aged. Dr. Clemens turned pale. That photo? It was taken during World War I. The operation? A secret British experiment to locate liminal spaces, areas where reality thinned, places of silence, of echo, of breakage. The soldiers had vanished. No trace, no remains, only whispers. From the trees. The area they vanished in? Same forest Jonah's battalion entered nearly 3 decades later. It had a name, once, a forgotten one. Locals refused to utter it, but ancient maps from the 1800s labeled the region with a single word, written in blood-red ink. Der Fleischerwald, the butcher's wood. And in the margins of that map, scribbled in trembling cursive, "They don't just take your body, they take your memory, your shape, and if they like you, they let you leave. But not whole." Jonah was not the first, and he wouldn't be the last. Dr. Clemens began digging, both literally and historically. In 1907, a group of German explorers went missing in the same region. One man returned. Mute, covered in symbols carved into his back. Not by blade, but by fire. He died 2 days later, on his tongue, an iron nail. In 1871, a Jesuit priest attempted to exorcise the forest. He vanished mid-sermon. Witnesses said the trees moved to surround him, like arms wrapping in prayer. And then, nothing. Only silence. The deeper she went, the more the stories aligned. Different times, different wars, same woods, same vanishing, same symbols. Somehow this place wasn't just haunted. It was hungry, feeding on memory, identity, and pain. Then, the breakthrough. Buried beneath a rusted floorboard in a forgotten military archive, Dr. Clemens found a locked metal box. Inside, a decaying journal bound in skin, a single photo, the chapel, a recording, labeled, "Echo, Operation Iron Teeth, do not play." She played it anyway. It began with silence, then humming, the same melody Jonah described, and then a voice, software gentle, feminine. "This land remembers. It remembers blood. It remembers fear. And you, soldier, you are welcome." Then screams, then static, then, "Return, return, return!" After that, the file corrupted. Jonah never heard it. But that night, he awoke from his sleep gasping, blood dripping from his nose. And on the wall above his bed, written in something dark. You brought it back. Security cameras? Wiped? And Dr. Clemens? She disappeared the following morning, but she left a message, an old voice memo from her phone. It's not just a story. The forest isn't a place, it's a wound, and wounds fester. She warned that the chapel wasn't built there. It grew there, from sorrow, from sacrifice. I don't know what Jonah saw, but I believe him now, because last night I saw it too, and it saw me. The government shut down the facility 2 days later, classified it, burned the records, relocated Jonah. No one's heard from him since. But a strange thing happened just before the files disappeared. One of the cleanup crew, Private Allen, took a photo on his phone. Said the chapel reappeared in the tree line while he was on night patrol. He shared it with a friend before his phone died. The image? Still. Faint. But behind one of the stained glass windows. There was a face. It wasn't Jonah. It was someone else. Someone in a 1916 uniform, smiling, mouth open, too wide. And in the reflection of the glass? Private Allen himself. Standing. Frozen. Watching. He hasn't spoken since. And the photo? Gone from the cloud. Only the friend remembers it now. But you remember it too, don't you? Even though you never saw it. That's how these things work. They bury themselves in thought, and thought is how they spread. What happens next? You're not ready. Because in the next chapter, they come back, not in dreams, not in stories, but in daylight. They didn't wait for the night anymore. It began in broad daylight. The sky was overcast. Still. No wind, just the kind of gray that makes shadows disappear. And in the middle of the road outside the restricted zone, a truck stalled. The driver, Corporal Nathan Hill, stepped out to check the engine. When he turned back, the road was gone. Behind him, nothing but trees. Endless, suffocating trees, pines twisted in directions that made no sense, bark stretched like skin, branches curling downward, heavy with moisture, even though there was no rain. And at the end of that path, something moved. Slow, deliberate. 2 legs, long coat. No face, just a dark blur where a head should be. Hill screamed. He never made it to the checkpoint. They found the truck idling, door open, engine still warm. But Hill? Missing. Except his boots, neatly placed in the center of the road, facing the forest. Over the next 48 hours, 4 more soldiers went missing from surrounding bases, all without signs of struggle. All vanished near the perimeter of the so-called cleared zone, each one left behind a trail of teeth. Again, molars. Perfectly intact, arranged in spirals. One of the guards monitoring the infrared drones said something chilling. They're walking like they're guided, not running, not lost. It's like they've been summoned. He was found the next day, on base, naked, curled in a fetal position beneath his bunk, covered in the same spiral carvings Jonah had described. He kept whispering the same word over and over. Home, home, home. Then the animals started acting strange. Birds wouldn't fly over the region. Dogs refused to bark in its direction. One trained K9 bolted toward the tree line during a routine patrol and just stopped, sat down, tilted its head, stared into the woods, and howled. Not like a dog, like a person. It howled a name, Jonah, and then dropped dead. No injuries, no explanation. A few brave or foolish personnel attempted another recon into the forest, equipped with advanced tech, night vision, sonar, even GPS pulse beacons. The signals were lost within 60 meters, and when one soldier's body was found by drone footage, his mouth had been removed. Not cut. Gone. As if reality itself had erased it, just skin where lips should be, and his eyes wide open, still blinking, but full of black fluid, Then came the lights. People in nearby towns, miles from the zone, began reporting glowing orbs hovering above their homes. Green, blue, pale red. One orb appeared just outside a child's bedroom window for 7 nights in a row. On the 8th night, the child vanished. Only her stuffed bear remained, clutched so tightly that her fingerprints were embedded in its fur. The family's TV turned on by itself that morning. Ojiban, static-filled screen. Then that same melody again. Da-da-da-dum, da-da-da, da-da. Back on base, an officer awoke in the middle of the night to find muddy footprints on the ceiling of his quarters. Not adult-sized, child-sized, walking upside down. No doors had been opened, no alarms triggered. No one believed him. Until 3 more reported the same thing, and all described the same dream. A chapel in the woods, stained glass windows weeping blood, a woman in black with no mouth, and Jonah, standing next to her, smiling. Then came the biggest incident yet. A helicopter went missing. No radio contact, no transponder signal, just gone. They launched search teams, found nothing. Until a week later, its black box was discovered, buried, under 6 feet of earth, on top of an old burial mound no one knew existed. The audio was intact. 10 seconds of silence. Then the pilot whispered, "We see them. They're not supposed to be here." Then screaming. Then the sound of wings. Not mechanical, not animal. Wings that beat like fabric snapping in a storm. And underneath it all, that same voice. "Return!" By now the base was in full lockdown. Orders came from the top. Shut it down. No one in. No one out. But it was too late. Because the strange phenomena weren't just in the forest anymore. They were moving, appearing in dreams, in reflections, in memories. Soldiers reported conversations they didn't remember having. Wounds they never received. Scars they swore were never there. One woke up screaming because he said he remembered dying in 1916. Another claimed to be someone else entirely, a name that didn't exist on any record, a battalion that hadn't existed for over a century. He hung himself 2 days later, left a note. They told me I could leave, but not as me. And the chapel? It was seen again, this time not just in dreams. A townsperson caught it in a photo while walking her dog along a hill. One moment, trees, next moment, the spire of a chapel peeking through the fog. She turned to show her husband. When she turned back, it was gone. But when she developed the photo, the chapel was still there. And in the window? A child. Mouth open, eyes empty. We thought this was about a haunted forest. But maybe it's not the forest that's haunted. Maybe it's us. Maybe wherever soldiers go. Whatever they suffer, whatever they leave behind, it doesn't stay behind. It waits. And now, it's waking up. By this point, explanations weren't just demanded. They were begged for, but no answer satisfied the fear. The military assembled a task force, not standard, not public, shadow units, scientists, linguists, psychologists, and a man known only as WW. No rank, no records. But when he spoke, even generals went silent. He walked into the operations room, placed 3 items on the table. A rusted compass that spun continuously. A page from Jonah's journal, sealed in glass. A photo of the chapel that hadn't been published. Then he spoke. "This isn't supernatural. It's structural." "Confusion," he elaborated. "The forest isn't haunted. It's fractured, a breach, a rupture in spatial memory. We're dealing with something that doesn't just manipulate reality. It records it and replays it." He called it echo space, a term pulled from experimental research on non-linear trauma loops. Essentially, places where intense emotional trauma burns through the fabric of space-time, leaving behind scars, rooms that remember, ground that replays pain like a broken reel. But in this case, it wasn't passive, it was aware. "The forest is a wound," he said, "but something's living inside that wound, something ancient. And it doesn't want healing, it wants attention." Still, the brass demanded proof. So the task force set out to collect it. They brought drones, LiDAR, thermal sensors, electromagnetic resonance equipment. Only one drone made it back. What it captured changed everything. The footage began normally: tree canopy, fog, ground level, static brush. Then, at exactly 13 minutes in, a sudden burst of white, not overexposure, not light, a figure standing, not visible to the human eye, but clear in infrared, its shape shifting, head too tall, arms too long, no feet, just roots sinking into the earth, and behind it, other figures, rows of them, all standing motionless, as if frozen in time. One frame showed dozens. Next frame? None. Then the drone dropped from the sky. Footage ended. Later, back at the base, scientists reviewed the log data. The drone's GPS never left its launch point. It had flown for 15 minutes. But according to the satellite, it never moved an inch. Impossible. Yet confirmed. "It's not just space that's broken," W muttered. "Time is bleeding too." Then came the soil samples, extracted from near the riverbank where Jonah was found. Analysis showed anomalies. Carbon dating returned inconsistent results. Some samples read 2023, others 1915, 1870, 1200 AD prehistoric, all from the same scoop of earth. One core sample revealed human DNA, but not of any known modern ancestry, and embedded deep in the sediment, a coin. British, marked 1914, melted along one edge, with a child's fingerprint preserved in the metal. Then the symbols started showing up again, on walls, inside locked rooms, etched into mirrors, always spirals, teeth, circles inside circles. The same pattern found on Jonah's chest. They glowed faintly under black light. When traced with an EMF scanner, each one gave off pulses, a rhythm. When converted into sound waves and played back, it matched the melody, the same eerie piano motif heard in the woods. "They're not signs," W whispered. "They're invitations." The team tried to digitize the journal pages, but every scan came out corrupted. Letters rearranged, words reversed, photos warped. On one page, the face of a soldier morphed into a grinning skull when viewed through thermal imaging. Another page, blank to the eye, revealed a message under heat. "Don't read this aloud." One technician did. He collapsed. Eyes rolled back. Began laughing uncontrollably until he coughed up blood. He later claimed he'd seen the forest, but from above, from impossible height, and it looked like an eye, a living, watching eye. That blinked. Then came the internal conflict. Some scientists claimed this was all mass hysteria, group delusion amplified by stress, sleep deprivation, and environmental anomalies. Others weren't so sure. They referenced ancient texts, folklore. In nearly every war throughout history, there had been mention of vanishing battalions, ghost regiments, invisible zones, from the Roman legions to the trenches of World War I. Even in Vietnam, soldiers spoke of units that marched into valleys and never returned. But this wasn't coincidence, it was recurrence. "War leaves scars," one researcher said, "but some places bleed forever." Then something shifted. A soldier on night patrol reported seeing the chapel. But this time, not just the outside. He claimed to see inside it, and what he described shook even the skeptics. Rows of pews, all filled, with people, but they weren't alive. They were frozen in states of agony, hands raised, mouths open, eyes stitched shut. Every single figure looked like a soldier from a different war. Roman, British, Vietnamese, American, all seated, all still. And at the front, a pulpit, where a woman in black stood. No face, just a void, and in her hands, a book, bound in skin, open, empty, waiting for a name. When the soldier was asked how he knew all this, he said he hadn't seen it, he'd dreamed it. But when shown an artist's sketch of the chapel's stained glass window from the photo, he vomited. Then whispered, "That's not a window, that's a mirror." Whatever this is, it's not random, it's structured, but not human. It follows rules we don't understand, patterns just beyond our reach, meanings buried in our fear. What happens next won't just challenge what's real, it will challenge who we are when no one remembers us. Because in the next part, the search for truth becomes a hunt, and the forest stops waiting, it comes knocking. By now, even the skeptics were scared. But fear didn't stop the search. It accelerated it. They wanted answers, and they wanted them fast. So they went back in. Not just with soldiers, but with specialists. People who'd spent their lives chasing myths, breaking codes, mapping what others dismissed as coincidence. They called the new team Echo 2. And they entered with full awareness that they might not return. They brought high-frequency sensors, drone flares, geospatial tags, and reinforced suits lined with Kevlar and EM shielding. But the most important item? A recording device. Analog, because every digital attempt failed. But tape? Old-fashioned reel-to-reel? It worked. At first, they moved through the forest in silence. Daylight filtered through the trees, but it didn't feel like light. More like memory. Each ray was slow, heavy, like syrup dripping from the canopy. After 20 minutes, their GPS started to stagger. 30 minutes in, it collapsed entirely. But they kept going, following marked trees and time-stamped breadcrumb beacons. That's when they heard it. Breathing. Not theirs. Not animal. Deep, rhythmic, like something exhaling beneath the earth. They recorded it. And the reel held. Later analysis showed the sound looped every 47 seconds. Perfectly. Like a heartbeat that wanted to be noticed. Then they found the first object. An old cartridge casing. Rusted. Bent. Stamped with a date. April 14th, 1916. Inside it, curled like a dead insect, was a piece of paper. Unfolded carefully, it read, "It wasn't the war. It was what the war opened." Chills spread across the team. They moved on. Found bones, small, human. Children's bones, laid in circles around the base of a dead tree, charred black. No one touched them, but one scientist, Dr. Hanna, stood too long near the tree, just staring. When they called her, she didn't turn. When they touched her, she whispered, "It knows we're trying to understand." They pulled her back. She screamed, bit her own tongue. But later, calmed, smiled, said she was fine. Except her voice didn't match. She spoke with an accent, a British lilt from the early 1900s. And when asked her name, she paused. Then said, "Lillian. Lillian Hayworth." That name appeared in the old World War I archives. A nurse who vanished near the Butcher's Wood in 1917. No one had said that name out loud. And yet, Hannah had. Without blinking. She didn't remember it later. Didn't remember the tree. Didn't remember the mission. Just said, "The forest is inside me now." But the real discovery came at the edge of the ravine. Buried beneath collapsed rock, they uncovered a hatch. Steel, unmarked, locked tight, but cold to the touch. They forced it open. Beneath? A spiral staircase carved from bone-white stone. They descended, 17 steps. At the bottom, a chamber, perfectly round, walls covered in symbols they'd seen before, spirals, teeth, circles, eyes. In the center, an altar. Not religious, functional. Above it, hanging from twisted wires, was an object unlike anything they'd ever seen. A cube, pulsing with dim red light, reflecting images that weren't there. One team member, Graves, swore he saw his daughter's face inside it, though she had died 5 years earlier. Another said he saw a younger version of himself, screaming silently. They recorded it, brought the footage back. But when they played the tape, nothing, only static. But the sound wasn't blank. It carried rhythm, a coded pattern, a voice. When translated using military ciphers, the message read, "They buried it, but you dug it up, and now it sees you." The team left immediately, but not all of them made it. Graves didn't return. Neither did Dr. Hana. They weren't lost. They chose to stay. Back at the base, those who returned began exhibiting strange behaviors. One soldier began carving the chapel into his skin, using nails. Another whispered to shadows in the corner of the room. All of them, without prompting, began drawing the same thing. A spiral inside a square, always red, always smudged. Even when they used blue pens, even when there was no ink, the images bled through paper, onto desks, into the floor, and one night, through the wall, the markings appeared in the barracks hallway, and beneath one of them, words etched into metal. "You brought it out." Now it wants to go further. They thought the forest was the containment, but what if it was the prison, and they just broke the lock? Because now things were appearing in other places. A chapel in photographs taken thousands of miles away. Journal pages written in the same hand appearing on printers in other military bases. And a child in Belarus who suddenly began humming a song no one taught her. Da-da-da-dum, da-da-da. The evidence was everywhere now, but it didn't explain what this thing wanted. Some said it was feeding. Others thought it was a message, an echo of guilt, loss, sacrifice. But one scientist, just before losing his mind, scribbled a sentence on the wall of his lab before vanishing. A sentence that keeps surfacing. "It's not the dead who haunt us. It's the memory of what we made them become." They thought they were investigating. But maybe they were being studied. And in the next part, when the line between truth and nightmare breaks completely, we won't be asking what happened. We'll be asking how to stop it, if we even can. This part of the story, you won't believe it, because the people who lived it barely do. It began with silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that presses on your chest, that makes you feel like the world just stopped breathing. All electronics failed at once. Cameras, communications, lights, watches, and then came the noise, a thud, far off, deep, like the heartbeat of something waking beneath the ground, followed by the smell, metallic, sharp, like burnt copper and rotting flowers. That's when they knew something was about to happen. 3 members of Echo 2, now relocated to a secure bunker, began hallucinating. Or, they said it was hallucinations. But when 3 people described the exact same figure, down to the number of buttons on its coat, it's not a hallucination. They all saw the man. Tall, thin, skin like dried wax. His mouth was stitched, but he smiled through it. When asked what he did, none could remember. Only that afterward the lights flickered, and they woke up an hour later. And on the bunker wall, a message, etched perfectly into steel. No tools nearby. "Open the chapel. Finish the procession." The next night, a base commander vanished during sleep. His quarters were locked from the inside, but he wasn't there. The window? Barred. No tampering, only one clue. The words, "You saw her too," written on the mirror in moisture, finger traced, but no prints. Then came the encounter that changed everything. A patrol team sent to scout the newly formed perimeter anomalies reported contact with something. They saw figures, dozens, all standing still at the edge of the tree line, unmoving, uniforms from different eras, some tattered, others pristine, faces hidden under cloth. Some wore masks, others had no faces at all. One soldier tried to speak. They turned toward him in perfect unison, not slowly, like puppets on strings, and when they took a step forward, just one step, the entire squad fell to their knees, vomiting. One described the sensation as seeing time backwards. Another said he saw his mother die again and again and again on loop. None could explain it. One went blind for 27 hours. Another developed a second heartbeat in his neck, heard only by stethoscope. When they recovered, they drew what they saw. All the same, a chapel. Floating, with roots instead of a foundation, and hanging from those roots, bodies, swinging in rhythm, smiling. But perhaps the most terrifying moment came during a live stream experiment. They decided to broadcast from inside the edge of the zone. 2 operators, 1 camera, 1 audio recorder. What the viewers saw was unexplainable. At first, just trees, fog, the usual. Then, movement. A figure behind the trees, then closer, then standing directly in front of the camera. The screen fuzzed, glitched, and for 4 full seconds, a face filled the frame, but no one could describe it. When viewers tried to describe it later, they couldn't. Some vomited, others cried, one man went into cardiac arrest. The video file corrupted immediately afterward. All that remained? A single frame. Of the forest. But the trees? They weren't trees, not really. They were arms, hundreds, all reaching upward. Then came the final signal, from Jonah. Or at least, that's what they think. A radio tech monitoring old emergency bands heard a faint signal, buried under static. They cleaned it up, enhanced. A voice emerged, broken, hoarse. "This is Jonah, not safe. Chapel is open, they're coming through." Then screaming, then, "Not forest, not dead, just forgotten." Then silence, for 30 minutes. Then, a knock, 3, slow, deliberate. It came from inside the bunker wall, but no one was there, just a spiral, etched in dust, and beneath it words no one had written. "One of you opened the door. Now all of you must walk through." That night, a scientist dreamed she was floating above the earth, looking down, and where the butcher's wood should have been. There was a crater, an eye, open, blinking, watching her. She woke up bleeding from her ears. When medics rushed in, they found her scribbling over and over on the walls, a sentence that had never appeared before. "We are not their first world. We are not their last." After that, operations ceased. The zone was sealed. But some believe that's when it truly began, because reports started trickling in from places far beyond the original site. Symbols showing up on buildings in Asia, dreams of a black chapel in South America, people waking up with old war scars they never received. As if the chapel wasn't bound to one forest anymore, as if it could move. We've passed the point of disbelief. Now we're into horror. Because next, the memory of what happened spreads, and some don't even know they're part of the story yet. But soon, they will. At first, the signs were subtle. A soldier couldn't remember his own name. A technician found his watch running backward, then forward, then freezing at 3:03 a.m. The same minute every incident had started. A nurse began sleepwalking. Each time she was found standing in front of a black door that didn't exist during the day. On the 3rd night, she didn't wake up. They found her eyes open, staring, pupils dilated, mouth moving, repeating one phrase over and over. "The door is open. The door is open. The door is..." And then, nothing. She collapsed. Heart stopped. For 7 minutes, she was dead. And then, she came back. No memory. But her voice, different, deeper, slower. She asked for a name no one recognized. Is Jonah still here? Everything was falling apart. Containment had failed, but no one said it aloud, because if they admitted it, it became real. That's when the phenomenon spread to the sky. Satellites orbiting above the zone began capturing anomalies, blurs, glitches, blackened areas in the forest that no light could penetrate. Even stranger, the zone itself had shifted coordinates, physically, moved 5 miles south. No tectonic activity, no sinkholes, just relocation. And when one recon drone flew through the new border, it captured something impossible. A landscape of trenches, miles long, rotting barbed wire, craters, old rifles buried in mud, a perfect replica of World War I's Western Front. Except, there was no record of it ever being built there. And the figures? Still, standing in formation, uniforms covered in moss and blood, unmoving, but watching. And when the drone flew too close, every figure turned at once. The drone feed cut, and the operator went blind. People began losing time. A 24-hour blackout, a memory gap where they'd wander, write symbols, speak in voices that weren't theirs. Some came back, some didn't. One officer was found whispering to a static-filled radio. Yes, I remember now. I was one of them. I left, I came back, and now I bring the others. He clawed his face open moments later, carved a spiral across his skull, bled out smiling. Then came the mass hallucinations. Except they weren't hallucinations. Not when everyone saw the same thing. On July 12th, 0442 hours, the northern watchtower picked up movement. But not from the forest, from beneath. The earth shifted, cracked, and a structure began rising, slowly. It was the chapel, not a copy, not an illusion, the original, the one from Jonah's dreams, from the photo, from the depths of memory, only now it stood in the open, stone rotted, windows flickering, and the figures inside, moving, not walking, floating, slow, as if time itself didn't apply. A bell rang once, though there was no bell in the tower, and every soldier within earshot fell to their knees. Some sobbed, others screamed. One tore out his tongue, another whispered a sentence before vanishing completely. No flash, no sound, just gone. His words? We answered the call. Now we become the choir. At this point, they tried evacuation. They loaded survivors onto a convoy, 43 soldiers, 3 scientists, 1 priest. Only the vehicles made it back. Empty, seats warm, engines running, and a message on every dashboard screen. Not typed. Not digital. Scratched into the plastic from inside. You can't leave a story once you're in it. Command collapsed. No more reports, no more cover-ups, just silence. And from that silence, the melody, da-da-da-dum, da-da-da, broadcasting through dead channels, whispered in dreams, sung by children who shouldn't know it, and always followed by a question. Do you remember where you were when you disappeared? Because that's how it works now. The chapel doesn't wait in the woods. It comes to you. One final recording surfaced, from a guard who somehow escaped the final collapse. His voice trembled. The chapel opened its doors, not just in the forest, in minds, in memories, in places you thought were safe, your childhood home, the park where you first kissed someone, the alley you never wanted to walk down again. They're all doors now. And one by one, they're unlocking. He ended the recording with a warning. Don't follow the melody. Don't answer when it says your name. And whatever you do, don't look in the mirror after midnight. But of course you will. We all do. because now the question is no longer, what is it? It's, what part of you has it already taken? At some point, even the idea of truth begins to fray. What you know, what you believe, what you've seen with your own eyes, none of it means anything now, because they decide what's real. And reality? It's just another window in the chapel, waiting to shatter. They said the site was abandoned, erased, buried. But that was a lie. There was one facility still active, deep underground, off-grid, no signs, no name. Inside it, a vault. And in that vault, evidence. The last physical remnants of Echo 2, one blood-soaked duffel bag, a decaying journal with ink that moved when you looked too long, and a strip of analog film, half melted. Only 2 frames were salvageable. The first, the interior of the chapel. Blurry, but clear enough to see what stood at the pulpit. A woman in black, no face, her arms raised, and behind her, rows of figures seated in pews, headless, but all facing forward, in their laps, mirrors, all angled toward the lens. And in those mirrors, not reflections, you, whoever watched it, saw themselves, sitting, smiling, mouth stitched shut, frozen, like they were already part of the congregation. The second frame was worse. It showed a hand, gaunt, gray, dripping with something dark, pressing against the inside of the camera lens, clawing, scraping, trying to come through. A researcher screamed when she saw it. She threw the projector into a wall, said she heard it whisper her name. Then, she disappeared. They found her badge embedded in a mirror in the bathroom, cracked in a perfect spiral. Then came the final journal. It wasn't from a soldier. It was from W, the man who first said, "The forest is structural." Turns out he knew more than he admitted. Much more. Inside the journal, maps, old, predating modern geography. They showed places around the world marked in red spirals, always in places of immense violence, mass graves, lost villages, battlefields wiped from history. Each one had its own chapel. Each one had doors, and every 50 to 60 years, they open. In the back of the journal, one phrase repeated, "Echoes don't just reflect, they wait." He theorized these places weren't random. They were designed. That something, someone, had placed them as receivers, collectors, altars to grief, and war. War was just the sound that opened them. He wrote, "They aren't ghosts, they aren't demons, they're remnants, scraps of forgotten pain given form. We call them entities, but they aren't things, they're memories that want to be seen. And the chapel, it's their mouth. Every soldier who dies in agony adds a brick. Every scream adds a window. And once enough sorrow is collected, the door opens." Then he vanished. But before he did, he left one final audio log. A simple tape labeled, "For the Last One." It played clearly, his voice, "If you're hearing this, it means you've seen it. You've felt it. It's in your dreams, maybe in your bones. I'm sorry. There's no way back, only through. But here's the truth. It doesn't want to hurt you, not at first. It wants to show you something. Not what you fear, but what you've forgotten. Because memory is pain, and pain is currency. It buys passage, and the price is your name." That was it. Then static, then silence. But behind the static, if you slow it down enough, if you isolate the waveform, there's a whisper. One word. Jonah. They searched the earth for him. Every database, every photo, every lead. But Jonah Riker no longer existed. Not officially, not biologically. No fingerprints, no DNA, just stories. And in those stories, he walks still, through dreams, through memories, through chapels that appear where there should be none, wearing a uniform no one recognizes, smiling with a mouth that never opens, and always, always humming da-da-da-dum, Da-da-da. You want this to end. But endings are illusions. There is only the moment when the chapel notices you. And after that, you're already inside. You thought it was over. You thought the door had closed. But this story doesn't end with silence. It ends when you start hearing the melody again, in places it doesn't belong. A parking lot, an empty hallway, your childhood bedroom. Because once you've been marked, it follows you home. The first reports came from across the world, unrelated, uncoordinated, but identical. People waking up with unfamiliar scars, mirrors that no longer showed reflections, but something behind them. Symbols appearing on walls no one had touched, and in every case, they dreamed of the chapel, not in the forest anymore, not in a war zone, but in their own cities, their own backyards, their own memories. A man in Japan woke screaming, said he'd walked through a door in his basement that didn't exist the day before. Inside, the same red-stained glass, the same pews, and in the front row, a child with his face, but older, sad, mouth sewn shut. He woke with soil in his hands, fingernails torn, mud under his eyelids. A woman in Argentina reported hearing knocking from inside her oven. 3 knocks, she ignored it. The next morning, her kitchen window had a spiral etched in the condensation. When she blinked, it vanished. But her dog refused to enter the kitchen again, refused to bark, just stared, tail low, whimpering. She hasn't cooked since. A soldier in California checked into a VA hospital. He claimed he'd been in combat, but his records showed otherwise. He was never deployed. But when examined, his body showed trauma consistent with trench warfare. Frostbite scars, chemical burns, shrapnel embedded in bone. When asked how it happened, he said, "They let me come back, but not as me." In the UK, an urban explorer live-streamed from a supposedly abandoned subway tunnel. Halfway through the broadcast, the signal flickered. Viewers gasped as the tunnel ahead transformed. The walls stretched, candles appeared, lit, and at the far end, the chapel, clear, detailed, towering. He took 1 step forward. The screen went black. His body was never found, but his phone was, still recording, still warm, and still playing that melody. Over and over, the phenomena weren't just returning, they were escalating, and the connection was undeniable. Every person affected had one thing in common. They had seen, heard, or dreamed of Jonah, even those who never knew the name, even those born after the war. Because the chapel doesn't just pull from memory, it plants it, like a seed, waiting, and once it takes root, you see the door everywhere, in windows, in puddles, in the corner of your eye, never clear, but always present, always turning toward you. One survivor began tracking her visions. Every night she'd sketch what she saw. The chapel's shape changed slightly with each dream. It grew. Pews multiplied. The windows grew darker. And the figures, they started moving, slow, glitching. One by one, they began walking out of the frame of her vision, until the last sketch showed nothing but an empty chapel. Then she woke to find the drawing on her ceiling, burned into the plaster. Her apartment has been vacant ever since. Neighbors still hear piano notes echoing down the hall, even though she lived alone, even though the electricity was shut off. A priest in Poland attempted an exorcism. He live-streamed it. He recited every prayer he knew. But as he read, the pages of his Bible began to rearrange. The words rewrote themselves, new sentences, new commands. One phrase repeated over and over. Not a demon. A memory he collapsed midstream. His church burned that night. No source, no ignition point. Only the altar survived, covered in ash, and in the ash, the faint imprint of a spiral. Governments denied everything. They called it mass psychosis, internet hysteria, fabrications. But then came the most terrifying shift yet. Children. Children who had never heard the story. Children with no connection to war, to violence, to anything, began humming the melody. They drew spirals in their notebooks, played games called Find the Chapel, and when asked who taught them, they always pointed to the corner, even if nothing was there, especially when nothing was there. One child looked at her mother, smiled, and whispered, "I'm not me anymore. She's wearing my name." And across all continents, reports flowed in, of sightings, of sounds, of waking up in trenches that vanished by sunrise, of seeing the chapel flickering like a mirage in malls, in forests, in mirrors. It wasn't staying buried anymore. It was remembering itself into reality. And we? We were just hosts, pages in its journal, instruments in its song. Some said the chapel is the afterlife. Others said it's older than death, a memory that became flesh, a ritual built not with magic, but with suffering. But the truth? It may be worse, because one final message came through, sent via radio, received by accident on an old ham frequency. The voice was clear, female, calm, familiar. It said, "We have returned. You left us, forgot us, now you'll remember. Not because you want to, but because we never left. You were just looking away. Now open your eyes." And just like that, it begins again. In places we thought were safe, in memories we buried, in corners we refused to look, because the chapel doesn't sleep. It waits. And now, it walks. It wasn't a war zone anymore. It was a message, carved into earth, etched into minds, stitched into the fabric of our shared memory. And now, the final piece was falling into place, not because someone solved it, but because it wanted to be solved. The final confrontation began without warning. No blaring sirens, no flashing lights, just a whisper, broadcast on every frequency. 3 words. "You are ready." It happened at 3:03 a.m. Every screen on every device still working turned black. Then, static. Then, the chapel. But not an image, a live feed, streaming from nowhere. Inside, pews filled with figures, motionless, the altar lit by flickering, colorless flame. And standing before it all, Jonah, or the thing wearing his shape. He looked human. But his eyes? There were too many. Not all at once, not symmetrical. They shifted. A slow orbit of vision across his face. He opened his mouth, but didn't speak. Instead, the chapel shuddered. Not physically, emotionally. The way a nightmare feels just before you wake up, except no one was waking up. Some called it a hallucination. Others called it a global psychic event. But for those who were watching, truly watching, the room they were in began to change. Walls grew shadows they didn't cast. Mirrors started to pulse, and the smell. Old earth, rust, and violets. That same bittersweet scent the soldiers first reported in the woods decades ago. It was here now, in their bedrooms, in their offices, in their cars. And then came the knocking. 3 knocks, always 3, not from doors, but from inside walls, from mirrors, from beneath beds. Then, just silence, until someone said, "Let them in." At the original base, what remained of it, W's journal resurfaced, unburned, untouched, sitting neatly in a chair that hadn't existed before. Inside, the last page had rewritten itself. A sentence in blood. The chapel was never a place. It was a decision. To remember or to forget. A team of 5, scientists, soldiers, survivors, made the choice. They returned to the forest, the epicenter. What they found, not trees, not fog, but memory itself, solidified. The ground beneath them was layered in history. Each step triggered flashes, a trench collapsing, a medic screaming, A child being led into the dark by a smiling soldier, and in the center of it all, the chapel. No longer rotting, now immaculate, as if built yesterday, pure white stone, stained glass windows glowing from within, the doors wide open, inviting. They entered, together. No fear left, only the weight of knowing. Inside, the pews were full, not with bodies, with versions of themselves, wearing the same faces, crying, screaming, praying, some laughing, some already gone, at the pulpit. Jonah. Still, waiting. When they approached, he finally spoke. Not with sound, with memory. A flood of images hit them. Every scream ever. Uttered on that battlefield, every sacrifice made and erased, every soldier who was never buried, every forgotten cry for help echoing into nowhere. They understood. The chapel wasn't evil, it wasn't good either. It was balance, a ledger, a keeper of those left behind. And Jonah, he was the first who remembered. He chose to carry them, to hold the weight, because someone had to. One by one, the team stepped forward. And as they did, their memories began to burn, not painfully, but completely. Their guilt, their grief, their forgetting. And when they opened their eyes again, they were alone, in a field, no chapel, no fog, just grass, just wind, just peace. But that peace is temporary, because one returned with a mark, a single spiral on the palm, and every time they close their eyes, they see pews, and the woman in black, waiting, always waiting. We want stories to end, but some truths don't conclude. They continue, through us, through memory, through whispers. And when the final confrontation ends, the real question isn't, what happened? It's, what did you bring back with you? This is the part of the story that's hardest to tell, not because it's violent, not because it's horrifying, but because it's quiet. And sometimes quiet is where the truth hides best. After the final confrontation, nothing looked the same. Not the forest, not the sky, not the people who came back, those who returned. They said the chapel was gone, but they still heard it. Not in their ears, in their bones, like a heartbeat out of sync with the world, a rhythm that never quite left. One survivor, a linguist, began drawing in his sleep. Night after night, hundreds of pages, not art, blueprints, of the chapel. Not how it looked, how it functioned. It wasn't a building, it was a mechanism, a spiritual centrifuge, designed to spin sorrow until it thinned into something usable. Energy? Memory? No one knows. But the more he drew, the more the walls around him began to change. They curled, bent inward. His house started to resemble the chapel's interior. Not visibly, no bricks, no glass, but the way the space felt, heavy, sacred, watched. Another survivor, silent since their return, finally spoke. One sentence. We weren't meant to understand. We were meant to remember. Then she smiled. And vanished. No door, no exit, just a chair, still warm, and a single tooth on the floor. Perfectly clean, still humming. The government sealed the records again, redacted everything, burned what they could, buried the rest. But you can't erase what lives in memory. You can't undo a story once it's been seen. And people had seen it, in dreams, in flickers, in impossible places. The chapel appears now where grief is heaviest. Hospitals, graveyards, old schools, and sometimes on mirrors fogged by breath. Always faint, always fleeting. But it's there. And if you stare too long, you might see your own reflection blink before you do. That's when you know you've been marked, not cursed, chosen. To remember, to endure, to pass it on. Because that's the final truth. The Ghost Battalion was never just a group of missing soldiers. It was never just about Jonah. It was never just about war. It was about us. All of us, our history, our wounds, our refusal to look at what we buried. The chapel is what happens when memory is denied long enough to rot, then given shape by those who can no longer scream. Pain, when ignored, becomes echo. Echo, when fed, becomes presence. And presence needs a place to live. A chapel, a spiral, a whisper, and when enough people hear the melody, they hum it too. You may want closure. You may want to hear, "It's over. You're safe." But that's not how this ends, because someone, somewhere, is still dreaming. And in that dream, the chapel's doors are still open, still waiting. You're still here. That means some part of you knew from the beginning. You knew this wasn't just a story. It was a warning, wrapped in memory, delivered through silence, and sealed behind a melody you've already begun to hum without realizing it. Da-da-da-dum. Da-da-da. You've heard it. You'll hear it again, because now you know. The Ghost Battalion didn't vanish. They transitioned from soldiers to echoes, from men to message. The chapel, it still exists. Not always in the woods, not always in dreams. Sometimes it's in your living room, hidden behind a flicker in the TV. Sometimes it's in your reflection, just behind your shoulder for a second. Sometimes it's a voice you mistake for your own, whispering, "We remember." So you must too. What about Jonah? No one knows where he is, but they know when he appears, just before the dream, just before the knock, just before someone forgets who they are, because a memory not their own begins to bloom. He's not a ghost, he's not alive either, he's a threshold. Walk through him, and you're never really you again. There are some who say the chapel will fade, that if we forget, it loses power. But forgetfulness was the mistake. That's what created it. That's what gave it shape. That's why it sings. Because in every battlefield there's a moment where silence becomes unbearable. And in that silence, if you listen hard enough, you'll hear the footsteps. Slow, wet, carrying grief like a torch. We've tried to contain it, bury it, rename it, erase it. But you can't bury pain that doesn't want to stay underground. You can only host it until it finds another voice. So this is the end. But it's not a resolution, it's a responsibility to remember, to speak, to keep the doors locked. And if you ever hear knocking, 3 knocks, slow, heavy, don't answer. But whatever you do, don't pretend you didn't hear it. Because here's the final truth. Some stories don't want to be forgotten. Some memories demand a witness, and some chapels are built inside us. Thank you for walking this path. If your heart's still beating, if the room is still quiet, if no shadows have moved since we started, you're lucky. But don't relax, because tomorrow or the next day or 20 years from now, you might wake up and find your name scratched into the glass from the inside. Thank you for following this journey. If this story made you feel something, fear, curiosity, wonder, then please like, share, and subscribe. And if you ever hear that melody playing when it shouldn't, remember this: you were warned, and you are not alone.